some of the banks, they have very large graduate and undergrad hiring programs, and these programs are designed to bring in fresh talent into the organization, and there's a lot of investment that goes on for maybe a year, sometimes even longer, in the talent that is brought in, all with the hope of building them up and then moving them up the chain, and hopefully making sure that the person retires from the same organization after putting in 30, 40 years of good working life in the same company. And the flip side of that is to identify and track outside talent. So, when you are looking at from a pure HR perspective, you sort of pretty much start with a hiring acquisition, go out and fill it, and then move on to the next one. But when you look at attracting talent from a CEO perspective or from a CTO perspective, you take a more long-term view, and that long-term view is constantly looking out. So you're like a talent scout. You are constantly on the lookout for good talent, whether it is in competition, whether it is still in school, whether it is in other jobs, in other roles. You are always on the lookout, and even if you don't have a position, even if you can't bring somebody in, you start, if I can use the word, working on them. Right? You start making sure that you know who they are, where they are. You stay in touch with them. Social networks allow you to remain connected with those people. You very certainly start working on them in terms of making sure that they get the right impressions about your organization. You also get an opportunity, and if I may say, you get that opportunity at somebody else's expense to validate your job. So if somebody looks very good to you, and you do all of this, you also get to see how good that person really is, and while somebody else pays for his or her salary. And when you do that, you are always ready with good quality talent if you need to hire at any point in time. So let's move on to the next part, which is really developing top talent. So if you're able to bring in good talent, you move forward and you start developing talent. And when you start developing talent, one of the first things that you should have is essentially career paths and succession plans. And these are really two sides of the same coin, because if you're going to move somebody up, you're going to also have to get somebody to fill in that position. And when you move somebody up, you're also filling in somebody else's position usually. So it's very important to understand what kind of career paths exist, and usually you should have more than one path, because people may want options, and people increasingly want options. So how do you chart the course? Now, many organizations that I interact with have very linear, straight departmental career paths. Usually they are very obvious at the first 3-5 years of an employee at the intake level. And after that, the picture starts getting hazy. Somewhere, someplace, HR can't very convincingly say this is the next stop for you. And after a point, usually at the CXO level, it becomes very hazy, right? And if a youngster on campus were to ask you, I'm getting hired in the HR function, can I become the CEO of your company? How would you answer that question? Do you think that's possible? If you do, then what is the career path, and what will it take for somebody to get there? And that's the kind of career pathing that you need to do. You need to understand how people will move about. We live in a world of specialization today, so there is a lot of specialization in people, and we always look at very specialized skills. You're a marketing person, you're a salesperson, within sales, you're an inside salesperson, and so on and so forth. But as you get to the top, you start becoming more a generalist than anything else, and you have the focus shifts on some core competencies that are relevant. And how do you make sure that by the time people get there, they have had a chance to imbibe that and develop themselves? So those are the kind of things that go into developing career paths. This is the next one, which is the assessment models, is something that I really cannot overstress. This is at the heart of the entire talent management process. And if you look at the companies that have done well, these companies have very rigorous assessment systems. They are able to measure delivery, they're able to measure current capabilities, they measure future potential, and they are spending an enormous amount of quality management time, quality senior management time, quality leadership time in constantly reviewing this for people. I'm always reminded of what Jack Welch said when he said that he spent 60% of his time reviewing the performance and reviewing his people. And that's, sorry about that. Sorry about that. Okay, my bad. I should have turned that off earlier. Sorry, but hopefully we are back where we were. Right. So I was talking about the assessment models and processes. So essentially, like I said, I can't overstress this. Very, very important, because this is really what will tell you how good your people are, how well things are happening, because developing talent is making people move up the pyramid, and you will always have to make choices. Who gets to go past each block, right? And if you do not have a system that you can rely on, you will not be able to make the right decisions. And more than anything else, this selection and elimination will in itself become a deterrent to the kind of culture and the kind of talent management system you have. So very important that you have a good system, very important that you have a thorough system, very important that you have a system in which the senior management team of the organization is invested, and finally, a good system in which people place their trust, people trust its subjectivity, its confidentiality, and so that is really what you need to move over. Good companies also watch over talent, right? So HR does not really get involved when there is an issue. HR does not get involved once the hiring is done. HR actually is constantly engaged, right? So when people come in, whether it's physically opened or not, but let's say there's a folder for a person, and then somebody in HR is constantly reviewing what's going on with that person. They are constantly watching out for that person's progress, the kind of movements that person has. So it's almost like somebody's got a dossier on you and is tracking. And I'm sorry if I'm sounding spooky about it, but essentially the idea is that somebody is watching over you, somebody is on the lookout and is making sure that you get the right opportunities and that you're rightly assessed, and you don't feel forgotten. And sometimes employees don't realize this. It's not very obvious, but HR does that in companies that have great talent strategies. Creating opportunities and test capabilities is a very vital part. Now, usually HR does not engage with what goes on. Line managers decide, pretty much business needs determine who gets to do what, who goes where, who's doing what. And a lot of times sometimes line managers take good decisions to develop their people and they give them opportunities because they would be good for them. But sometimes these are largely driven by business exigencies, right? And really, if you want to test somebody, if you want to grow somebody, throwing opportunities, putting them in crisis situations is the best way, because that's really what brings out the best in people, or worse for that matter. And therefore, HR needs to engage. HR needs to engage with business all the time to understand where such opportunities and crises are happening in the business, right? And they need to be an active stakeholder in order to be able to understand that, so look at the watch over part and then say, okay, fine. So I have these X people that I am tracking, and I know that these people have never had, out of this person has never had an opportunity to be in a situation like this. And you've got to have that very readily available with you. And you also have to be making sure that you're tuned into where these things are happening in the organization. And wherever possible, obviously business will determine whether this can happen or not. But sometimes It's very important. If you know that, and you know that well in time, you could be very helpful in helping, with the decision in terms of saying, hey, why don't we get this person across, move this person over, let him or her face this situation, and let's see what this person does. And that is really what goes on in developing your people, so that when time comes to make choices, you know that people have had these situations. If you look at the Indian Army, for instance, and I think several other armies across the world would qualify for that, they're a terrific organization when it comes to doing this. They have this tremendous capability of rotating their people across different situations and making sure that people get to be in different situations and they perform. So they're not identical situations, but they're at least similar situations, and then you can compare two people on how they did against that option. So I mean, fundamentally, this point is really very critical, but it's as simple as that. You have to think of your job as really being one of creating a lineup of CEOs for the organization. So as HR, when you hire a management trainee, don't see your job as hiring 20 management trainees this year. You have to see this as bringing in 20 young people who will probably be all capable of becoming CEOs of this company, knowing that all of them may not even be there or may not qualify for that, but you have to start with that premise. And if you see this hiring as that, and that's really the difference of perspective that I'm talking about. So when you think like that, when you act like that, and you build for that, that is when really you're thinking strategically. Let's move to retaining top talent and seeing what that requires. First and foremost, in today's world where we do not have such watertight differentiations between personal and private lives, the trend is more and more for people to work at home and to do stuff that's home stuff from work. Both husbands and wives are working. Usually there isn't that much domestic help. Support systems of extended family are not there the way they used to be. Life is very different. Life is a lot different today. And therefore, how do you ensure that you know how a person, so we talked about getting those 20 people and thinking that they will be CEOs, but you also have to understand that those people, even before they become the CEO, will marry, will have children, will have parents, will lose parents, will go through so many different things in their own lives. How as an organization are you going to get impacted? How as an organization are you going to support? How as an organization, when will you get involved or not involved? What systems, what policies, what practices do you have? Because end of the day, you have to make people comfortable. Aligning personal aspiration with career paths is also an extension of the same logic, and really trying to understand where are people headed.